welcome to MS4. Today we're coming to you from the Green Wall, and we're going to be talking about my musings on Kackie Reviews Beauty's take on the Tati wellness journey. That sounds like a mouthful. It's basically thinking about someone else's thoughts. So that's how we roll here. So anyway, good morning, let's get started. So I'm going to be kind of giving you the roadmap. We're going down the rabbit hole a little bit. This is a more esoteric take on things rather than specifics and responding to specific things that Tati had been recommending. Because for me, this is a very complicated issue, and I'm only doing this video because I do have thoughts, but I had a lovely viewer who is also a content creator ask me what my thoughts were on this, and so here we are. I'm going to be going over a number of different concepts, so I'm just going to outline that for you, and that way, I have some notes so I'm not getting horribly off track as I am wont to do. So I'm going to be going over the concept of at this time. The second thing is that socioeconomics are always an issue. New relationship energy, or NRE, evangelical, the nature of being an evangelical, the notion of a middle road, and to finish, the idea that life is more complicated than we want it to be. So anyway, let's dive in. Here we are. So the three, not the most important words, but three really important words to remember are at this time. I currently am nearing the 50 next year, and part of the problem with a lot of the conversation is people often like to think about things as being enduring. They're finding the silver bullet, they're finding the holy grail, and that this is going to be it, and it's going to be it for the rest of their lives. But part of the problem is, just as we age, our whole body changes. We have new thoughts, new things going on with our body, our skin, everything. So even if we're finding something that works really well, there always needs to be the caveat that at this time, this is what's working for me, the individual. I laugh because I was at a party once, and this woman floated by, and she was the perfect, the long flowing hair, the sparkly eyes, and she was listening to the song Happy was playing, and she wafted by us and said, "This song will never get old," and then wafted on by. And I often think about that, just as the quintessential moment in time where somebody completely is so wrapped up in the moment and their youth, and they think it's going to last forever and it will never get old. Now there are some songs that I believe that are probably that way, but I know there's some songs that, if every bar band or every county fair band play this song, it's gonna get old. Pat Benatar stopped singing Hit Me With Your Best Shot. She would have other people sing it if she was going on tour, but for a long time there, she would not sing that song because she was so tired of it herself. So the notion of at this time is really important to bring to any conversation about wellness, about what's working for you. The idea that something is not never ending. I mean, my double negatives, but I follow one of the guru people, Kyle Cease, from afar, and he had started doing the raw vegan diet. It worked out well for his wife, so he had started doing it, was having great success with it, had dropped some pounds, was feeling a lot of energy. Fast forward 2.5 years, he was starting to feel tired. He had colds all the time. He went to his doctor, and his doctor said, well, maybe you should throw a fish or two back in your diet. That, hey, maybe things are changing and you need to respond to it for optimal health. So that notion that you've found something and this is going to be enduring really needs to be taken with a grain of salt, which is probably what we should be titling this video with a grain of salt. So that notion of things are going to change. I know for myself, perimenopause and menopause was this strange, weird place that I knew nothing about. Like I read about things, but you don't know till you get there. And my mother had a hysterectomy, and so she didn't really have the same experience, with that. So that's been a strange things that are happening with your body and your psyche and your energy and all of the things that you never expected to happen. So that, in a very deep way, saying that something's, a wellness program is working for me at this time and that it's going to change is really important. And it's important to be expressing that to people, because sometimes you really do get caught up in that whole, like, this is never going to get old. So I always want to start with the at this time. Always when I talk about this. At this time, I am not interested in this. But things might change. I might suddenly develop an interest in it or a need for it, or, just somebody else sparks in me a desire to be, obsessed about something, and suddenly I am. So I always want to start off with at this time. Right at this moment in time, this is what's happening with Tati. This is what she's experiencing. But that idea that this is not going to change, we need to take all of that with a very large grain of salt. Now, the second thing that really stood out to me is the idea that socioeconomics is always a thing. It's very easy for someone to say that, I've started to eat meat and I feel amazing, and so therefore maybe you should try it. Good quality meat is expensive. Bad quality meat is also expensive, just slightly less so. And there's a reason that a lot of the subsistence crops, beans and rice, they're less expensive, but in some ways they're you can look at complete proteins, nutritionally things are good, are sustaining, but they're not sexy at all. And it's hard if you are poor to get good quality meat on a regular basis, unless you have your own farm or you trade with other neighbors that are farmers, if you're in that kind of an area and can do that. But that's a very specific place, time that makes that possible. And not everybody is able to, especially if you live in cities and you don't have any farming near you or trade things. Although my first apartment in LA, the building behind me had a whole yard of chickens. And my first night in LA, I was up late because helicopters were going by. And then in the morning, I was woken up at the very early morning by a rooster crowing. And I was so confused. But back to the point, it's hard to get good quality meat oftentimes, depending on where you live and what your socioeconomic status is. Also, it is difficult to get good medical care. Now, it's hard to get good medical care anyway, but if you can't afford insurance, that's even more difficult. And even if you have insurance, that whole idea of trying to doctor shop to find a physician who is right for you, who has good things to say and is not going to be dismissive, is very difficult. And also, it's been shown by study after study that people of color have a more difficult time being heard by physicians, and that even in clinical research, we have a problem getting a good number of people of color to do clinical research, because for people, medicines behave differently. People are more or less likely to develop certain types of cancer. So it's critical that we get a good swath of different types of people for clinical research, and yet, we're just really, starting to go in the right direction for that. But so both socioeconomics make it difficult from just having a healthcare provider. You may not have insurance, you may not have the ability to go see your doctor because maybe you have insurance, but taking time off is impossible. So it's a very difficult question that, you know, I totally understand and agree that a lot of times the healthcare providers do not give you what you need to solve issues. It's a difficult, complicated question, but you really have to note the fact that people that are in a different socioeconomic bracket have things much, much harder. Back in 2001, this woman named Barbara Ehrenreich, I have a hard time pronouncing her last name, I apologize. She wrote a book, Nickel and Dimed, and it was her kind of going to a different place, getting a job that was minimum wage, and trying to see how a person could survive on a minimum wage job in America. And as I was reading it, I was kind of laughing about it because I thought, you know, like what a no duh. Why is this like news? And then I realized that I was not the target demographic for this. I had actually lived this, but this was written for people who maybe had not lived this, having to make $1 out of 15 cents, and who didn't really understand what it meant to have to subsist on your own with a minimum wage job. And the things that she pointed out, you know, you aged faster, it made you tired, it made you more cranky, and as she put it, you know, like that it even changed your kind of philosophical views on things. Like she became more cagey, you know. And I know from my own experience, it's really easy to say, well, I would live a certain way, I would live a certain way of honesty or you know, integrity. But then when you are right up against something, to make that decision is really difficult. And that whole notion of judge not lest you be judged is kind of super important to keep in mind. Like, it's really easy to say that, you know, I would never do something, but then if your kids are sick or gonna die, would you? There you go. So I feel like that weight of the burden of constantly grinding to try and keep up a certain level of existence is really underestimated. And one of the things about health, I know from my own autoimmune disease that my ability to regulate my happiness and my stress is critically important, because as soon as I have a lot of stress or a lot of, you know, rage or anxiety or whatever it is in my brain, my body pumps out all sorts of hormones that will try and kill me. And on the opposite side, if I can, you know, lessen my stress and be a little more happy in my life, I am less likely to die, to kill myself from the inside. So, but that's, I have to see that as the fact that that's a privilege of where I'm at now, to be able to limit my stress. And I can't just say to somebody, well, you should be happy, and expect you to just, you know, be able to do whatever it is to make you happy. It's work, and some people are disadvantaged from the beginning of things because of where they are born, the place they're born, the country, the parents that they're born to, the socioeconomic status, and the color of their skin. All of these things are a strike against them to begin with, or maybe, I'm not going to assume, they could be, you know, being born to a certain person, a certain place, a certain time could be incredibly enriching and wonderful, or it could not be. But I know that when we're talking about the healthcare that we're getting in America, that socioeconomics is always lurking in the background somewhere. Because if nothing else, that time. If you're going to be a scientist to try and figure out what works for yourself, it does take time, it does take experimentation, and if you are just have your nose to the grindstone trying not to die, time is so incredibly expensive. It's very expensive. So I think in all of this, it explains in many ways why we are looking for the silver bullet, the holy grail. We're looking for somebody to give us a life hack, something to take us less time, because time is so precious to us. we don't have the time, we don't feel like to do all this experimentation. So if we're just able to watch Tati on our lunch break and she says eat salt and meat, we're like, okay, we're gonna try it, because what else we're gonna do, and we have no time or money to experiment on ourselves. So we're looking for that life hack always, and that's just a matter of that the socioeconomic thing that we don't realize is the time and space is such a luxury, and that not everybody can afford that. So there we go. There's the idea that socioeconomics is always an issue. Even when you think it isn't, if you take a little time, you can figure out, time, space, money, all of these are luxuries that you may or may not have. So the next thing we're going to talk about is NRE, new relationship energy. This is a big thing in cosmetics. If you watch any cosmetics YouTubers at all, you will see that new relationship energy. I just got a new palette. I'm in love. It's like, it's so nice. We love each other. It looks beautiful on me. I've never had anything like it. And then good YouTubers will come back a month, a week, a year, sometime later, and give you their thoughts about how it's really working out for them. Now, part of this is, like, if you're doing skincare, you really need that longitudinal view on things. I've been working on the Natasha Denona Hygen for months now to get my head around it, to get my thoughts. Because at first it's shiny and it's new and everybody's thinking it's all sexy and they're reporting back their initial thoughts, and then you never hear anything again. How does it actually work? So if you're going to be dropping a certain amount of money, how is this product actually going to be behaving and working longitudinally for me? But that new relationship energy is so exciting. We are wanting to see people who are alive and inflamed with energy, because we feel like if they're on fire, we could be on fire and we could have that energy too, and it's all exciting, and we don't see any of the bad things. So we don't see, the blush that's the first impression. We don't really get to see how over time it gets hard panned in like a week. Or that we wear it for the whole day, and by the end of the day it looks like we've got splotchy things on our face. I've had some liquid blushes that looked so pretty when I put them on, and 2 hours later all the little pinpoints of color had soaked into my pores, and so I looked like I'd just been splattered with, like I was some kind of weird painting with splatters. And you wouldn't have seen that from the first when I applied it, but 2 hours later you would have. So it's that whole honesty of long-term longitudinal sort of follow-up. But with new relationship energy, we don't see any of the flaws, we just see the bonuses. It's sexy, it's invigorating, and it's nice. New relationship energy is nice. And it also helps us discover new things, to have a very exciting moment in life, and to fall in love with things, because we do need to have that first initial burst of excitement and love. But it's the question of, is it sustainable? And that's the problem with some of these, where people are saying, this is what I've discovered, this is going so well. How far are you into your journey, and do you couch it as, I've been on this journey for 12 weeks and it's going well, and then I'm going to check back in with you at the end of the year and tell you how I'm really feeling longitudinally. And that's not as sexy. I mean, we just want to hear the good things. But it's really important for somebody, especially who has a lot of power, to start couching things with at this moment, this is working wonderfully for me. At this time, just for me, I'm finding it works. Your mileage may vary. And that's more responsible, but much less sexy. And again, it's totally tamping down that new relationship energy that we want to have. But it's important, the more power that you hold, sway and influence, the more ears that listen to you, it is much more important from an ethical standpoint for you to start thinking about what the waves and ripples of what you are saying is going to do. Whose ears will it fall on? How will it be? So I think that's the whole balancing, the trying to find the middle road always. How can I let people know something that I'm experiencing now that I think is wonderful and may in fact be really good for them, with the being responsible, saying I am a single unit of one. And I love that Kackie pointed this out, that you have to really think about yourself as a singular unit, and that just because you love something, that does not mean that it automatically applies to everyone. So I think that's kind of the responsible thing, is to tamp down a little bit of your enthusiasm and think about how you want to be phrasing things, so you're doing your due diligence and you're not just basking in the glow of new relationship energy. And that's the case with a new diet, a new practice, a new piece of makeup. All of these things, you're going to have the NRE, you're going to want to, and that's fine, but just to always have that in mind, that it's like, this is how I feel at this time. We're going to check back. We're going to come back. We're going to realize that this may just be that I have on those rose-colored glasses of newness, and maybe this is a steaming pile of horse poo, but we shall return to find out which is the case. Now, the other thing about the NRE is that it tends to lead people to what I call being evangelical. Most people, a large swath of people really want good things for their fellow human. When they find something new that is working for them, that's filling them with hope and goodness and wonderfulness, they want to share. They want to share the good word. The issue with being overly evangelical is, again, you are selling in some ways that new relationship energy, that whole, this is the silver bullet, this is the holy grail, this is the truth that is unchanging, that doesn't depend on your circumstances, doesn't depend on anything, but is the true and good information, word, product, whatever. And we can understand why we want to be evangelical, because we do want to share good things with other humans. That's a natural, I think, inclination. Not saying that people don't have nefarious, sorts of things. A lot of people want to sell you that feeling of the evangelical, I have the new, I have the good, I have the best, you should trust me, and accept this, as it will be the same for you. You will have this new relationship energy, you will have this freedom, you will have this blessing of things. And I could use other words than evangelical, but it kind of is that notion of, I am trying to bring you the good word. Now, part of the issue is that feeling, people will try and capitalize on to sell you something. I have the latest, the best, the holy grail. It will change your life. You should totally do this. And I always try and again, with the grain of salt, is this really going to change my life? Will I love this product in a year? I grew up, my grandfather always had the elusive dream, the whole next get rich quick thing. And one of the things that there was at one point in time that they were multi-level marketing this thing called Royal American, which were these basically MREs, but with this whole idea of like, oh, it's good for people who are vegetarian, it's easy, it's healthy, it's whatever. But it was basically just prepackaged food that were like the MREs. And I think about that all the time. They had different colored blazers that you would put on. and you would go to have these meetings, that felt a lot like the religious, tent revivals, because it was the latest, the greatest, the most exciting, the most change your life. And so I feel like that I get that feeling also when I'm, suddenly I have an infomercial that I'm watching, that I'm, it's trying to capitalize on this feeling of that evangelical, I will change your life, I will make you whole, I will, change your skin conditions, I will, make you beautiful, I will. And some of the time there's a grain of truth in there, and that's always what you're looking for, is the what's real and what's all the smoke and mirrors and that whole, so it goes from a person has something that's exciting that they are loving and want to share with their fellow humans, to I'm trying to capitalize on that same feeling of invigoration and of lighting up, in that evangelical way, to get you to come over to do this thing or have this idea, to I'm trying to sell you a product that may or may not work at all, but I'm trying to capitalize on that natural instinct to help people and to capture that actual transformative sort of a moment in life, and use it for my, I know this product is junk, but I'm trying to capitalize on that evangelical, in the best case, feeling of change and belief and hope, to lure you into something that I know is not. And so that's like trying to figure out, where a person's heart lies when they're sharing something. Are they just naive, new and excited and just really love something? Are they trying to have that whole evangelical process where I'm bringing you in? Or are they trying to take something that they know is not right or good or useful and bringing you in and using that same framework to try and lure you? And I think that's, Kackie pointed out that she wasn't feeling like Tati was being this type, that it was more, that she was more excited and not really realizing, what the trickle-down economics might be a problem, or trickle-down information might be a problem. And so, again, not as sexy. The truth is probably not as sexy, although it's more enduring and lovely, but not as, tasty. And I think that brings me kind of to the last point, that life is more complicated than we want it to be. In any of these conversations, the real conversations are probably horribly boring. Like, why would you want to watch that? Why would you want to be that? In some ways you need the life hack. You need that something fast, easy, quick, solve your problems. And that can be a need, but also you'd like things to be less complicated than they are. You'd like there to be a very simple explanation for what's going on in your body. You'd like a very simple, I would like a foundation that looks like skin, but gives me coverage, but takes down my redness, but that doesn't, accentuate my texture, that doesn't smell weird, that doesn't smell overly perfumed, that maybe has an SPF in it or doesn't have an SPF in it, depending on what I'm looking for. Like, just wanting a foundation is really super complicated. Do I want to be glowy? Do I want to be matte? Do I want to be somewhere in between and be velvet? Do I need to be able to not ball up under certain types of makeup? Do I need to be liquid? Do I need to be balm? Do I need to be powder? If we just look at foundation as kind of the metaphor for life, finding the perfect foundation is kind of like finding these solutions for life. They're different for everyone. First of all, even people with dry skin, different foundations work differently on people with dry skin. Some depending on what else you have going on with your skin, but other times it's just why your skin is dry, and what the actual ingredients are. That was the thing on my deep dive with the Natasha Denona. There's some weird ingredients in that are different than most every other thing that I've looked at that's like that, and they behave really differently. So, I'm looking at that going, how do you know? How do you know? And it's the same as with healthcare or other types of makeup. This trying to find something that works for you is really more difficult than you want it to be. And then you find the perfect foundation. It looks great, it's the exact right consistency, it's easy to put on, it doesn't smell weird, it makes you feel fabulous, it shows up in pictures and flash just fine, like all of the things. And then one day your skin starts to change and your foundation doesn't work like it used to. Or they decide they're going to reformulate and they're going to put something that you're allergic to in it, like a coconut if you have a coconut allergy, and it's no longer working for you. And so I feel like, if we're going to use a metaphor for anything, I feel like baseball is the closest example of life, if I'm going to be metaphorical. I know from Ted Lasso the football is life, but I really feel like baseball is a little more accurate. It's more of a long, slow, steady haul over, periods of time in which you can't win the season in the beginning, but you can lose the season in the beginning. I feel like that's the socioeconomic, how we begin, is like that. You could lose the game in the beginning and, or be set back in a way that it's really hard to get to the playoffs. And it's a long season and it's it's a grind. And I feel like that's but also very exciting and lovely. But I feel like if we're going to have a makeup metaphor, that all of this is more like finding the right foundation for you. At this time, it needs to work. How expensive is it? Can I afford it? The socioeconomic question. Does it have enough for me to fall in love with it? The new relationship energy. Do I love the packaging? Do I love the feel? They spend lots of time on how do things feel? What's the slip? What's the texture? How do I put it on? How does it work with my brush? And then, if I fall in love with it, I have that new relationship energy, I want to tell everybody about it. I want to, send samples to all my friends. I want to get in here, on a YouTube video and tell everybody how fantastic this foundation is, and everybody needs to have it, whether you can afford it or not. I want to have that whole, I want to share it with my fellow man because I think it's fabulous. Sometimes if I'm doing my due diligence, I let people know it's like, this is my skin type, this is what I prefer, with all these caveats of this is why it's working for me, and that I've only been using it for a week and a half. And if you watch a lot of videos or if you read reviews, people are like, well, I just got this and I've had it for a week, but I love it, it's the best thing ever, and it's like, or the difference is, how have I been using this for months, over different seasons, over different whatever, and do I still love it and think that you might want to try it, with the caveat that maybe it might work for you, maybe not. I may be just an individual of one. And then the last thing is just always having the nod to life is more complicated than we want it to be, and especially the more barriers you have to things. And it's not just socioeconomic, like, are you able to shop in different places? Do you have the monetary means? Do you have the ability to have things that are going to go bad, like something with, oils in them that are going to spoil? Or do you need something that have a shelf life? Like, you need your foundation to be able to last over a year and not, go rancid on you in 2 months. Do you have health concerns? Like for me, opening packages sometimes is a thing. And so for me, sometimes a barrier to me being able to use something is, how is it packaged? So it's a lot more complicated than we want it to be. And it's a lot closer to finding a perfect foundation than anything else. It's really trial and error, trying to get as much feedback as possible, trying to have time to do due diligence, wanting something that just works right out of the gate, and also something that's going to work for us longitudinally. So I realize this is not the juicy, sexy takedown of anybody, but Kackie's videos are always, I feel like, that she takes her time with them. She makes the salient points that are important to note, and that she does try to be, you know, when it is warranted, giving props to the places that she feels like that Tati really did express some things that might want to be looked at. So for me over here, I'm more on the thinky esoteric side of things, looking at this. But in the end, because one of my fellow creators had asked me what my thoughts were, I did decide to make this video. I wasn't necessarily setting out to, but I feel like, you know, if you're at all interested in more of that take on it, and something that's less sexy but maybe, you know, more workable for real life, that's kind of, you know, why you'd watch me. Less sexy. Either that or my voice is very soothing and you can sleep nicely to this. But those are my thoughts anyway. The idea that all of this is so much more complicated than we want it to be, but in the end it's really good that it's complicated, because it is complicated. So if we treat it like it's complicated, we're being actually more accurate to real life. Not as sexy, but more accurate. So hopefully my next video will be a lot more sexy. I am doing some decluttering, so I don't know that I would bet heavily on it being more sexy, but so one of these days all of my packages from Black Friday will arrive. I am still waiting. One is set to be out today, but I still have about 4 more things that have not been delivered. But I do want to say I totally understand people who work at the post office, at the UPS, DHL, USPS, for all the FedEx, all of those people are actually Santa Claus. They're trying to get it there on time and doing their darn best. And, you know, I feel like I'm trying to be in the spirit of things, of just being patient and being excited at the same time. That, you know, can I still be excited and impatient and all of those things? Yes, because life is complicated. So anyway, I will leave it there, and I hope all of you have a fantastic, complicated but lovely day ahead. And we'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.